The UFC, one of the biggest sports organisations in the world. Over 1,000 athletes, 42 yearly events, 316 fights. A titan in the sports world. But how did it get there? In Asia, MMA was a huge spectacle mainly comprising of performance wrestlers putting on a more convincing show by using real martial arts and moves in their performance. A Japanese tycoon who goes by the name of Nobuki Sakabara decided to make the fights real and created his own organisations named Pride Fighting Championship. This blew up and became the most watched sport in Japan's history at the time because the organisation was putting on a huge show that captivated audience from all around the world. These events also caught the eyes of Western civilization and even got fighters from all around the world to travel to Japan just to compete, even though it wasn't financially beneficial for the majority of them. On the 12th of November 1993, the first ever UFC event happened. It took place in Denver, Colorado, the first major MMA event for an American audience. The event was meant to show what martial art was the best by pitting people from different disciplines against each other. This ranged from karate to sumo wrestlers. The event was a tournament style, meaning fighters had to fight up to 3 times a night just to win. There were no rules apart from no eye gouging or biting your opponent. There were also no weight classes, so this led to some extreme matchups. In the final, Ken Shamrock, a muscular man, fought the underdog and unknown Royce Gracie. Due to Royce Gracie being from a real martial arts background, he submitted Ken and showed the world that real martial arts are a thing and it does not matter what you look like or how undersized you are, you can win. In 2001, Zuffa bought the failing UFC for $2 million to help legitimise the sport at the time. The media was berating the sport, calling it human cockfighting, and many states around America banned it altogether. To combat this, Zuffa made some rules and kit that the fighters had to wear to promote fighter safety to help the sport out of its hole that the media put it in. In 2005, the UFC was massively in debt and close to closing its doors. In a last-ditch effort, the company decided to try and hand its reality TV by making a show called The Ultimate Fighter, TUF for short. This puts up-and-coming fighters in a house together to train and fight each other to get a contract from the UFC, and whoever won got a 6-figure contract. Although the series was doing well, it wasn't doing well enough to keep the company afloat, but when it got to the live finale, Zuffa were ready to call it quits after the event. Luckily, Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar were the final fight and made it a spectacle. This made over 1.5 million people join and pay for the event midway through due to how intense and insane the fight was. This one fight saved the company from going under, and it is classed as the most important fight to ever happen in Western MMA history. In 2007, Zuffa buys Pride and promised to make a huge leap in the Asian market in plans on expanding, but this didn't happen. Pride hosted one more event under the Zuffa banner before closing its doors. This was a large backstab by the UFC, taking its one opponent out who was the biggest and best MMA organisation and claiming the throne. Most people disliked this move, as it took away what the MMA world originally fell in love with, although recently there have been companies trying to recreate the magic of Pride with such organisations as Rising, but sadly, nothing has come close to what Pride did for the MMA world. In a TMZ interview, the UFC president Dana White famously said that there would never be a women's MMA fight in the UFC.
When are we going to see women in the UFC, man?
Never.
This was short-lived, however, as 6 months later, the UFC signed a young Ronda Rousey and many other female fighters to the roster. Ronda Rousey would go on to be a key player in making women's MMA as noticed and as widely accepted in the world, as at the time, she became one of the highest paid sport combatants of all time and paving the way for women in a more male-dominated world. 2016 was a massive year for MMA in the Western world, as after all the scrutiny that MMA was put through in the Western world, it would finally conquer America. Ever since 1993, many states banned MMA, but since then, after unified rules and making it safer for fighters, every state lifted the ban apart from one, New York. For some reason, New York refused to lift the ban on MMA, and for years, fans and organisations alike would ask and beg for MMA to become legal in the state, and every time they would get turned down. But in 2016 they finally decided to lift the ban. This was historic for MMA, and the UFC treated New York to, at the time, the biggest event in MMA history, holding 3 World Championship bouts with history-changing occurrences such as Conor McGregor becoming the first person to simultaneously hold 2 titles at once. From 1993 to 2016, the world of MMA in Western civilization struggled for acceptance and to be taken as a serious sport. After years of scrutiny by the mainstream media trying to ruin its name and tarnish the reputation of it, it prevailed. MMA is now one of the biggest sports in the world, and it started with many people going to different countries just to participate or even see it happen, even when they had lost a lot financially. Back then, saying you did MMA as a job wasn't a thing, but it is now. And judging from its rich, full history, I can say that I know the sport will have a rich and full future as well.